If you pay attention to the world long enough, you start to notice a strange pattern. There are moments when everything feels like it should break open, the tension is there, the language is aggressive, the threats are explicit, and yet nothing happens. Not in the way you expect, at least. You watch enemies posture, you hear predictions of war, you see headlines that feel like countdowns, but the countdown never reaches zero. It just keeps resetting. That's the feeling that let me down this question. Here's the clarity that changes how all of this looks. Iran is not hesitating, and it's not confused. It's deliberately avoiding a kind of war it believes it can't survive. Not delaying, not miscalculating either, just avoiding. And once you see that, the rest starts to make sense. Because if you look at Iran from the outside, the obvious question keeps coming up. Why don't they do more? Why don't they go on the offensive? I mean, I asked these questions to myself. That's how I came up with this idea. Why don't they do covert operations or infiltration or agitation, unrest in their enemy's territory? Why not destabilize Israel internally, or why not push chaos inside the United States? Why not use those same tactics that have been used against them, but on their enemies? And if everyone agrees that conflict is coming sooner or later, why not choose the timing? Why not absorb the hit, strike them back hard, and make the cost unbearable? It sounds harsh, but it also sounds rational, at least at first. And now I'm going to get into that because when you start thinking about it, again, it makes more sense. That idea that Iran should maybe strike first or attack Israel and the United States like they're attacking it, that idea keeps showing up because it mirrors how humans think under pressure. If pain is inevitable, we want control over when it happens. If loss is coming, we want it to mean something. So the logic becomes, if we're going to lose anyway, let's make sure they bleed for it. Let's divide them. Let's fracture them. Let's damage their infrastructure. Let's create wounds that take decades to heal. We lose the war, but we win the aftermath. And on paper, that feels like strategy. But logic only works under one condition, that losing is survivable. Now, this is where Iran's worldview diverges and changes from how most people frame this. For Iran, losing a full scale war isn't symbolic, it isn't historical, and it isn't something you recover from slowly. It threatens the survival of the regime itself. The economy, internal stability, control. This isn't about pride or messaging, it's about continuity. That's the single difference that changes everything when we're looking at this. Most people on the outside unknowingly box Iran into two options. Option one is escalate now. Go ahead and just start the war, do a surprise attack on their enemies in a way that they're not prepared for it. Option two is to wait passively to be crushed later. But Iran doesn't accept that frame. It doesn't accept that mindset. They believe there's a third option. Not peace, not war, but pressure. A permanent, managed tension that never resolves into a final confrontation. And what I find interesting is how people react differently to that idea. Not because of geopolitics, but because how people respond to uncertainty in their own lives. Now, some people hear this and they think delay is weakness. They believe unresolved tension is dangerous, that it's better to act, it's better to force an outcome, or it's better to take the hit than live under pressure. Others believe survival comes from endurance. You hold your ground, absorb the pressure, and outlast the moment. And then there are people who believe the real power lies somewhere else entirely. And that power is in refusing to let the conflict reach a final form at all, and staying just below the threshold where everything becomes irreversible. That's the posture that Iran has chosen. So this raises that question: why not do covert destabilization? Why not infiltrate, influence, or stow unrest in the enemy countries? This is where imagination often runs outside of reality. Covert operations only work when they remain invisible against weaker states, divided societies, or unstable institutions. They can scale quietly. But the US and Israel are not those environments. They are saturated with intelligence. They have state of the art surveillance, counterintelligence, financial tracking, narrative control. Attribution doesn't need to be public to be decisive. Once Iran is credibly linked, even internally, the response doesn't stay covert. And more importantly, foreign agitation rarely divides strong states. It usually does the opposite. It creates unity. It gives governments legitimacy. It turns internal dissent into national defense. Iran understands that stirring unrest inside these countries risks making them stronger. So that's why maximum damage logic collapses. There's another assumption buried inside the idea of all-in escalation, that damage is equal. And it isn't. The US and Israel can rebuild. They have capital, they have allies, they have technology, they have narrative dominance. Iran operates under sanctions, economic fragility, and internal pressure. A war that devastates everyone still devastates some systems far more than others. So Iran is not dumb. Iran knows which side of that equation it's on. So this is the frame that quietly reorganizes everything here. Iran is not trying to win a war. It's trying to make war never become the only option. So it's not victory, not closure, it's avoidance of finality. Endless friction, controlled escalation, pressure without culmination. Because from Iran's perspective, the moment a full war begins, the game is already lost, regardless of how much damage they can inflict. So I'm going to tell you why restraint looks irrational. This is why Iran tolerates limited strikes without full retaliation. They don't tolerate it because they can't respond, because it can, but because escalation removes control. They accept tactical losses to preserve strategic survival. Now, from the outside, I know that feels weak and emotionally wrong. But emotionally wrong is not the same as strategically unsound. Iran's leadership believes something else too. That time doesn't wear down all systems equally. They believe their enemies face faster internal erosion. Political division, demographic pressure, commitment fatigue. Whether that belief is accurate isn't the point. The point is, their entire strategy is built around it. They believe waiting favors them in the long run. And that leaves us sitting with an uncomfortable realization. If Iran isn't waiting for war and isn't trying to win one, then the tension we feel has no release. There's not going to be a decisive moment. There's not going to be a final strike. There's no clean ending. Just pressure that continues and continues, which might be the hardest strategy for humans to accept. Not action, not defeat, but refusal. So, what you're hearing is my personal thought process, me breaking it down little by little to understand what is the strategy that these countries are using in the geopolitical arena. Now, it does bring up a natural question after understanding what Iran is doing. And that natural question is, if Iran is just waiting and trying to hold off because they are waiting for time for instability in their enemy countries to basically relieve pressure against Iran, then why is Israel in the US waiting? Why doesn't Israel just attack if they know they can just overpower it? And that's going to be the video that I get into next, and we'll break that down as well.